I stood frozen outside Vertex Logistics' sleek glass tower, the termination letter crumpled in my fist. Just hours ago, I had been the golden boy, director of data science, mastermind of the firm's revolutionary logistics algorithm, and an executive in waiting. Now, I was just another casualty of a company driven by quarterly profits and boardroom politics. Inside the conference room, it had taken less than 10 minutes for HR to erase my decade-long contributions with cold precision. Downsizing, they called it. Restructuring for growth. But I knew better. Vertex didn't want to pay me the residuals my contract promised once the algorithm was fully commercialized. Firing me now meant they'd save millions, and steal my work in the process. My chest tightened as I stepped onto the sidewalk, the city humming around me, indifferent. I looked up one last time at the Vertex logo, glittering high above. You just made the worst mistake of your life, I thought. I built your empire, and now I'll burn it down. I retreated to my apartment, a modern box in Midtown filled with muted tones and the faint hum of servers still running prototypes of my code. I didn't waste time mourning. For 6 months, I'd anticipated this move. The growing tension in leadership meetings, the quiet exclusion from strategic planning, the sudden NDA updates. I'd seen it coming, and I'd prepared. Buried in an off-site server farm under a false shell company, I had stored a clean version of my algorithm, refined, faster, smarter. It didn't just optimize routes and fuel consumption, it predicted disruptions before they occurred, adapting dynamically in real time. Vertex had only the beta. I had the future. I spent weeks tuning the engine, feeding it fresh data, and stress-testing the system against real-world logistics chains. What emerged wasn't just a competitor to Vertex's system. It was its extinction-level event. I knew I couldn't go head-to-head with Vertex under my own name. They'd sue, blacklist, and smear me, so I created Echelon Dynamics, a phantom startup with no public face. Through layers of shell companies and VPNs, I launched under a pseudonym, releasing my platform in limited beta to mid-sized logistics firms desperate to compete with giants like Vertex. Within 3 months, word spread. Companies were slashing shipping delays by 40%, cutting fuel costs by 25%. Echelon's software adapted in ways no one had seen before. While Vertex's legacy system stumbled through updates and bureaucratic integration, Echelon surged with agility. Venture capital came knocking, first cautious, then frenzied. I deflected the spotlight, staying invisible. Echelon's spokesperson, a well-trained AI avatar, and a rotating cast of offshore legal reps. I remained a ghost behind the machine. Back at Vertex, confusion turned to panic. Clients were dropping. Their system, once the envy of the industry, felt sluggish and antiquated. Their best engineers couldn't figure out why their own code felt familiar. It wasn't long before whispers of corporate espionage began to circulate, but the legal team found nothing. Echelon was an enigma, its IP walls impenetrable. Meanwhile, former Vertex clients shared glowing testimonials about their new provider, innovative, unbelievably responsive, almost predictive. I watched it unfold with grim satisfaction. I wasn't just hurting them financially, I was unraveling their credibility. By the end of Q3, Vertex's market share had dropped by 18%. Their boardroom turned into a battlefield, executives pointing fingers, demanding answers, launching internal audits. But I had anticipated their every move. I knew their processes. I'd built them. Then came the blow I'd been waiting to strike. Through a front company in Singapore, Echelon Dynamics submitted a proposal for a global logistics contract, originally earmarked for Vertex. one so lucrative it had underpinned their entire 5-year growth forecast. Echelon undercut their bid, but not by much, just enough to raise eyebrows and force Vertex to match, stretching their resources thin. They took the bait. 3 weeks later, Vertex's proposal fell through when a data breach, actually a precision-engineered leak orchestrated by me, exposed a flaw in their delivery estimates. The client walked. Echelon won the contract. Check. It was a junior engineer who first noticed it, a pattern in Echelon's code snippets during a competitive analysis. He couldn't prove anything, but the logic structure, the recursion patterns, they looked familiar. Too familiar. Vertex's legal team pounced. They launched a stealth IP investigation, trying to unmask Echelon's founder. When subpoenas to overseas entities came back with stone walls, they got creative. They hired cybersecurity mercenaries, the kind who'd worked for defense contractors to trace back the original data packets that fed Echelon's engine. One night, my alert system lit up. They were close. I paused, then smiled. It was time. I scheduled a live-streamed webinar through Echelon's official channels, a vision for the future of logistics. Tens of thousands tuned in, curious about the elusive company behind the disruption. The screen lit up with a silhouette at first, a moment of static. Then, I stepped into the frame. Some of you know me. Most of you don't. My name is Mark Carter. I designed the algorithm that built Vertex Logistics. They fired me, erased my name from their systems, and tried to steal my work. I let them. I leaned forward. And then I took it back. Gasps echoed through boardrooms and living rooms alike. Social media exploded. Headlines ran within minutes. I didn't stop there. I unveiled the original patents I'd filed in a sealed trust. I detailed the chain of events. I showed email receipts, version histories, legal documents. By the end of the broadcast, there was no doubt. Vertex hadn't just fired their best mind. They'd stolen from me. The news hit Vertex Logistics like a detonation. At first it was just whispers, rumors that a major client had pulled out, that contracts were being terminated without warning. Within hours, the panic had seeped upward through the corporate structure like smoke in a burning building. By the end of the day, Vertex's boardroom was a war zone. The catalyst was a single brutal press release. Transglobe Freight consolidates operations under Aegis Flow Technologies, ending all Vertex Logistics contracts, effective immediately. And that was only the beginning. The proprietary algorithm I had developed and had taken with me was now optimized, protected under a fresh patent filed under Aegis Flow, my stealth mode logistics startup. The same algorithm that once made Vertex indispensable was now redefining logistics under my control. Major clients followed Transglobe. Overnight, Vertex lost over 40% of its revenue. The stock plunged. Panic-stricken executives tried to stem the bleeding, but the arteries were cut too deep. Investors fled. Banks began pulling lines of credit. I watched it all from my modest downtown office, a far cry from Vertex's gleaming high-rise, but far more satisfying. I didn't smile. Revenge wasn't a grin or a laugh. It was a quiet thing, complete in its stillness. The fallout from Vertex's collapse wasn't confined to boardrooms and balance sheets. I had made sure of that. An anonymous whistleblower report, backed with internal emails, transaction records, and security footage, was delivered to financial regulators and investigative journalists. It exposed the corruption and collusion that had defined Vertex's rise. Rigged contracts, backdoor payouts, cooked books. The headlines were merciless. Vertex executives under federal investigation. SEC launches, probe into logistics giants' fraudulent dealings. Sources link CEO Warren Finch to widespread corporate misconduct. Warren Finch, once the untouchable titan of logistics, now found himself at the center of a media storm. He held a press conference to deny the accusations, but his voice trembled. When the subpoenas arrived at his gated estate, his empire began to crumble from the inside. I didn't watch the coverage. I already knew how it would end. 3 months later, I stood outside a nondescript conference room in a Manhattan law office. Inside were Vertex's legal representatives, remnants of a battered board, and Warren Finch himself, now pale and 10 pounds thinner. I entered with my attorney and 2 executives from Aegisflow. Warren's eyes met mine. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the firing. "You orchestrated this," Warren said, voice hoarse. I placed a file on the table. "What I did was reclaim what was stolen from me." "This isn't justice," Warren spat. "No," I replied evenly. "This is consequence." The negotiation was brutal. Vertex, desperate to avoid a full trial, offered a settlement, part financial, part symbolic. They'd dissolve all claims to the algorithm, issue a public apology, and pay damages to terminated employees affected by their illegal restructuring. I accepted, but I added a condition. Warren Finch must resign from all corporate boards, effective immediately. It was over in 36 minutes. I stood before the glass wall of Aegisflow's new operations center, watching the gentle blink of data points dancing across the massive LED map of global shipping routes. From here, I could track the real-time movement of cargo ships leaving Singapore, trucks crossing the heartland of the U.S., and rail lines threading through Eastern Europe. The office was quieter than Vertex's ever was. The tension was gone, replaced by something leaner, cleaner, focused. Behind me, Clara walked in holding a report tablet. "Traffic from legacy Vertex clients is up 12% this week. Seems like even the stubborn ones are coming around." I didn't smile, but the corners of my mouth hinted at something like satisfaction. "They were never loyal to Vertex," I said, "just addicted to predictability. Now that we offer it at scale, and with actual integrity, they're switching." Clara nodded, placing the report on my desk. "Still no counter from the new Vertex board. Think they've accepted the collapse?" "They won't accept anything," I said, "but they don't have the resources to fight." The truth was, Vertex wasn't dead. Not technically. A skeleton crew remained, trying to salvage what they could under new leadership. But its soul, its algorithm, its predictive engine, its vision, had bled out the moment I walked. And now, I'd built something better. It wasn't all triumph. I knew that success left trails. Lawsuits still lingered in the periphery. Former board members had filed claims. Government regulators had questions. The SEC had requested interviews. "I think they're trying to make you the villain again," Clara said, as she passed over the subpoena notice. "Classic spin. Genius goes rogue. Market destabilized. Public harmed." I read the document, calm. They don't have a case. They don't need a case. They need a narrative. That was true, and it irritated me more than I expected. Aegisflow's growth had been fast, but not reckless. My technology had streamlined logistics, increased transparency, and made even small vendors competitive against monopolized freight channels. But that didn't matter if the public saw me as a digital warlord who burned his way into dominance. Clara was watching me. "You could give an interview." I hesitated. "You've won," she said. "Now, maybe, tell your side." The interview aired 2 weeks later. A subdued studio. A respected journalist. I wore no tie, no grand gestures, just a plain navy suit, and my steady, unapologetic voice. "I didn't leave Vertex to destroy it," I said. "I left because the company I helped build became something I couldn't stand behind. The people steering it no longer believed in innovation, just exploitation. The interviewer leaned in. "And your revenge?" "It wasn't revenge," I replied. "It was correction. I saw a system rotting from the inside. I knew how to build a better one, even if it meant putting thousands out of work." That was their choice. They could have pivoted. They could have adapted. Instead, they tried to bury me. I just refused to stay buried. That line went viral. By the end of the week, opinion polls had shifted. The public wasn't wholly on my side, but many now saw the nuance. A flawed man, yes, but one who'd built, not just broken. I stood at the edge of the gleaming glass building that housed the Vertex Logistics headquarters. A quiet satisfaction bubbled within me, tempered by the weight of what had brought me here. After months of meticulous planning and execution, I had ensured that the company that had wronged me had felt every ounce of its miscalculation. I wasn't here to gloat, though. My purpose was far more deliberate, far more personal. My footsteps echoed as I approached the main entrance, the familiar hum of the elevator whirring in my mind. I'd been here countless times before, walking through these doors, once a prized executive, now a man with something to prove. Today, I was meeting someone important. Inside, the lobby was as pristine as ever. The soft lighting cast a glow on the marble floors, and the air was faintly scented with an artificial fragrance meant to evoke calm. My presence here felt foreign, yet it was fitting. I'd already dismantled much of Vertex from the outside in, but now it was time to face the heart of the beast, the man who had been at the center of my downfall, Michael Reynolds. Reynolds, the former CEO, had been one of the primary architects of my ousting. He'd been instrumental in orchestrating the environment that led to my firing under the guise of corporate restructuring. It had been Reynolds's smile, his cold, calculated demeanor, that had made my fall from grace seem inevitable. But today, I would make sure that Reynolds knew exactly who had won. The receptionist behind the polished desk barely looked up as I approached. With a practiced smile, she offered me a polite greeting. "Mr. Carter, you're expected. Mr. Reynolds is waiting in the conference room." I nodded, walking past the receptionist with a purposeful stride. My eyes were fixed on the path ahead, and I was ready for the confrontation that would bring everything full circle. The elevator ride was swift. As the doors opened, I was greeted by the sterile corporate environment of Vertex's upper floors. The glass walls offered sweeping views of the city below, but for me, the view outside seemed irrelevant. I was focused on what was about to unfold. I reached the conference room and paused outside the door, taking a breath before stepping inside. Michael Reynolds stood at the far end of the room, looking every bit the part of a man who had built an empire. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his demeanor calm, but his eyes flickering with something unreadable when they landed on me. "Mr. Carter," Reynolds said smoothly, extending a hand with practiced politeness. I did not immediately take the offered hand. I simply stared at Reynolds, feeling the tension crackle between us. "I assume you know why I'm here," I said, my voice low but steady. I was done with pleasantries. Reynolds dropped his hand back to his side, folding his arms with a slight smirk. "I have an idea. But why don't you enlighten me?" I stepped closer, my gaze never wavering. "You've lost, Michael. Everything you built is crumbling, and it's all because of you." Reynolds laughed softly, shaking his head as if I had just made a weak attempt at humor. "You really think you've beaten me? I was the one who put you in your place. The algorithm you created, the one you thought would save you? It's nothing now. The company is still here, thriving, while you're left with your little vendetta." My jaw tightened. "That's where you're wrong. You see, I didn't just dismantle your little empire. I've built something bigger, something better. Reynolds's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I smiled, a dark, knowing grin. Vertex has always been about logistics, about streamlining the supply chain. But you never saw the bigger picture. You never understood how the world was changing. My algorithm didn't just fix the problems within Vertex, it was designed to expose the cracks. And now, it's being used in a completely new way. Your competitors are already using it, and they're light years ahead of where you're stuck. For a moment, there was silence. I could see the flicker of concern in Reynolds's eyes, just the slightest twitch, but it was enough. The mask of confidence was slipping. You think they'll keep it from me? Reynolds finally said, though his voice held less conviction than before. I took a step forward. I already have your blueprint. I've already planted the seeds of your downfall. Your competitors are using my technology. But more importantly, they know how to use it better than you ever could. Reynolds clenched his jaw. You're a fool if you think that's going to hurt me. My gaze was unyielding. It's already happening. And once your financials come crashing down, it won't be because of me. It'll be because you were too arrogant to see the future. You thought you could bury me, but all you did was set the stage for your own collapse. Reynolds was silent, his face a mask of disbelief. I had hit a nerve, and it was evident in the way Reynolds shifted in his seat, the unease creeping into his demeanor. I straightened, my purpose clear. I came here today because I wanted you to hear it from me, face to face. I want you to understand that this isn't just about one man's revenge. This is about the future. Your future. And it's crumbling right before your eyes. The words hung in the air, thick with finality. I turned and walked toward the door, but as my hand grasped the handle, I paused. You're still in the game, Michael. But not for long. With that, I stepped out, leaving Reynolds to grapple with the reality of what had just transpired. The battle had been won, but I knew the war was far from over. As I walked through the city streets, my thoughts remained laser-focused on the aftermath of my meeting with Reynolds. The visit to Vertex's headquarters had been one of the final pieces in a long puzzle that I had carefully designed over the last few months. My journey had never been just about avenging my own downfall. It had been about proving that even in a corporate world where power and influence reigned supreme, there was always room for a disruptor. Someone who could see past the old systems and turn them inside out. The people around me continued with their daily lives, oblivious to the storm brewing behind the scenes. I wasn't like them. I couldn't afford to be. Not anymore. The battle I had fought was far from over. While my personal vendetta against Vertex had been fulfilled, my true mission lay ahead. With Vertex weakening, it was only a matter of time before other companies, other industries, would begin to feel the ripple effect of my algorithm. My work had already started to change the landscape, but it was just the beginning. I had one final piece of the puzzle left to place, and I would need to gather allies to do it. Over the next few weeks, my life became a blur of meetings, late nights, and strategic calls. Word had spread about my algorithm, and while Vertex scrambled to patch the cracks in their system, competitors eagerly reached out, hoping to learn from my methods. But I wasn't a fool. I wasn't about to give my creation away to just anyone. I had a vision for how my algorithm could reshape the business world, and that vision involved more than just selling it to the highest bidder. It was about creating an ecosystem, an alliance of forward-thinking companies who shared my values and understood the power of innovation. One company that stood out to me during this time was Equinox Solutions, a small but rapidly growing logistics firm based on the West Coast. Unlike Vertex, Equinox wasn't entrenched in traditional business practices. Their CEO, Laura Haynes, was a dynamic and ambitious leader who recognized the potential of my algorithm as a transformative tool for their operations. I had heard of Equinox's rise in the industry. They had grown rapidly, focusing on more sustainable, tech-driven solutions for logistics. Laura, known for her disruptor mindset, had built a reputation for creating agile, technology-forward business models that stood in stark contrast to the old guard of the logistics world. Our first meeting was set up in a sleek downtown office. Laura was already there when I arrived, sitting across from a large conference table, her laptop open in front of her. She was dressed in a sharp black blazer, exuding confidence, but with a certain openness in her expression. I could tell that she wasn't the type to waste time. "Mr. Carter," she said, rising from her seat and offering a firm handshake, "I've heard a lot about you." "I'm sure you've heard the good and the bad," I replied with a wry smile, sitting down. "I'm here to see if we can leave the bad behind." Laura laughed softly, nodding in agreement. "I respect what you've done, Mark. There are very few people in the industry who understand the potential of data like you do. But I'm not just interested in the algorithm. I'm interested in how you think about the future of logistics. I believe we can take what you've created and build something that will change the way the entire industry operates." I studied her carefully. She was no typical CEO. Her enthusiasm and vision were clear, and there was an undeniable sense of urgency in her voice. Laura was thinking beyond just financial gain. She was thinking about the long-term impact. "You're not here to buy the algorithm. You want a partnership," I said, leaning forward. "Exactly," Laura replied. "I see potential in your algorithm that even you might not have fully realized yet. But I need more than just the tech. I need someone who's been on the inside, who understands the system and the players. We're looking to disrupt the logistics world, but we can't do it alone." I sat back in my chair, contemplating the offer. This was what I had been waiting for. The kind of partnership that would elevate both my work and my vision. In Laura, I saw someone who not only had the ambition, but also the capability to execute on that vision. "I'm interested," I said finally. "But there's one condition. I'm not just handing over my algorithm. If we're going to do this, it's going to be on my terms. I want full control over how it's used. And I want to build something bigger, something that will last." Laura's eyes sparkled with determination. "I'm with you. Let's build something that will change everything." The partnership between me and Equinox quickly grew into something more than either of us had anticipated. With the power of my algorithm integrated into Equinox's operations, the company began to soar. They implemented my system across their entire supply chain, refining it and adapting it to new challenges. The results were astounding. Delivery times decreased, costs dropped, and inefficiencies were eradicated. But more than just the immediate impact on their operations, the technology I had created began to have an exponential effect on the logistics world at large. As Equinox grew stronger, competitors took notice, and soon I found myself in the center of a wave of innovation that was changing the industry. The media caught wind of the success story. Trade publications began to profile Laura Haynes as the visionary CEO who had helped propel Equinox to the top of the logistics world. But beneath the surface, I was the quiet force driving the revolution. The world knew my name, but it didn't know the full extent of my involvement. While Equinox enjoyed its success, I wasn't content to stop there. My ultimate goal was always about more than just transforming one company. It was about transforming the entire industry. I reached out to several other companies, large and small, and began forging partnerships. I was building a network, an alliance of companies all using my algorithm, all benefiting from the efficiencies it provided. With each new partnership, The influence of my work expanded until I became a key player in shaping the future of logistics. The industry that once cast me aside as a failure was now forced to recognize me as a leader in innovation. I had disrupted the system, and in doing so, had become a force that even the biggest players in the game couldn't ignore. But I wasn't finished yet. The final move in my master plan would be my most ambitious yet. I had quietly been working on something even more powerful than the algorithm that had brought me to this point. A new version, an upgrade that would revolutionize not just logistics, but the entire supply chain infrastructure. This new system would integrate AI, predictive analytics, and real-time data collection, creating an adaptive self-learning network that could predict demand, optimize routes, and adjust to changes in real time. It was something that would put all my competitors years ahead of their time. But it wasn't just about technology. This system would give power back to the companies that embraced it, breaking the stranglehold that the largest logistics firms had on the market. I knew that if I was going to change the world, it couldn't just be one industry at a time. My vision was global. I began to prepare for the launch, gathering my most trusted allies and the best minds in the industry. This was it, the moment I would bring it all together. The world was about to see what happened when one man's algorithm didn't just disrupt a company, but an entire global network. The night before the official announcement, I stood on the balcony of my high-rise apartment, staring out at the sprawling city below. The lights twinkled in the distance, but my mind was far from the view. I was focused on the next day, the beginning of something far bigger than I had ever imagined. Tomorrow, I would announce the launch of my new system, a system that would forever change the way goods moved across the world. And once it was out there would be no turning back. I had taken everything from Vertex. I had outsmarted them, dismantled their power. But now, I was ready to take control of the future itself.